Hello, Happy New Year and welcome back. Today I'm going to be continuing my mini money series. I'll link the playlist up here if you're interested. I've done a few videos in this series in the past, but today I wanted to talk specifically about debt. And I want to preface this by saying that obviously everyone is in a very different situation, and I know for some people certain types of debt are unavoidable. But I'm going to be talking obviously from my perspective, so I'm not trying to pass judgment on anyone else or anyone else's situation, but this is just kind of the philosophies that I kind of work by in my life. So I'm going to be talking about the types of debt that I currently have or have had in the past, which types of debt I've never had and I never plan on having. So if that's something you're interested in, then hopefully you enjoy this video. I guess I'll start with the debt that I currently have. And fortunately, the only debt that I currently have is a student loan. So in New Zealand, student loans are interest-free as long as you stay in the country. You can go overseas for like a holiday, but I think if you go overseas for more than 6 months, then you start getting interest on your loan. So I have obviously been over to Japan, but that was only for 3 weeks. So my loan is interest-free. I don't know the exact number of debt that I'm in for my student loan right now. I think it's around 30,000. So it's not as big as they come, but it's still quite a lot of money. Jonathan's grandparents actually put aside a certain amount of money for each of their grandchildren to use for their student loans. So he had his first student loan completely paid off when he did his initial music degree. So he had no loans from that. But then he went back to study last year. It was only a 1-year course, so it's not the most expensive loan in the world, but we still have that loan that we need to pay off. And then I didn't have grandparents that paid off my initial degree, so I still have that as well as my teaching diploma from a couple years ago. So yeah, it's all added up. I also got living costs while I was studying because I wasn't living with my parents, so I was, having to support myself. So I have living costs that I have to pay back as well, which is added to the amount that I have to pay back overall. So that's how it ended up at 30,000 for me, and then I don't know, I think about another 8,000 or something for Jonathan. This is a debt that I'm not actively paying back, so every time I get paid, a percentage comes out of my paycheck. So over time it is automatically getting paid off, but I'm not actively putting any extra money in. If the loan was gaining interest, then I probably would be, because I would want to get it paid off as soon as possible, but because it's interest free for as long as I have it, I'm not too worried about paying it off quicker. I think I worked out at the current rate that I'm paying it's going to take 10 years to pay off, but I mean, it doesn't matter because the amount that I pay is exactly the same whether I pay it all right now or if I pay it over the next 10 years. It doesn't change the amount. So I'm in a very fortunate position that that is the only debt that I have right now, but I have in the past, Jonathan and I had a joint personal loan for our first car that we bought. So the thing with this car loan is we didn't actually really need it. We had a car already, so we could have just kept that car that we already had and saved up until we had enough money to buy a new car. And that's the other thing. When I say new car, I don't mean a new car. I mean a car that someone else has used for however long and we're buying it secondhand. Cars are a really interesting topic because if you buy a new car, you pay like, I don't know, maybe 10 times what you could be paying for a car that's in the same condition but just being used by someone else already. So I think buying a new car, I mean, like if you've got the money, I guess go for it, but if you're gonna need to get a loan for it, I don't see the point. So yeah, this is a second-hand car that we bought from someone else that already owned it, which meant it wasn't super expensive. So I think it, from memory, 7,000 or 8,000. Definitely not the sort of money that we had just sitting in the bank at that point in our lives though. So while we could have saved up, it would have taken us quite a long time. And also, like, we could have sold our old car to give us some money towards the new car, but then we would have had a period of time with no car. So to make it easier for ourselves, we wanted to buy the new car first and then sell the old car, which meant that we needed more money than if we'd sold the old car first. So we went to the bank to get a loan that we were hoping to pay off like super quickly, because we were thinking like as soon as we sold the old car, that would be like most of it paid off. and then we just put all of our money into paying it off as quickly as possible. So we didn't get a loan for the entire amount of the car. We did have some money put away. I think the loan was maybe for half of the amount, maybe $4,000. And so that process was quite interesting for me because this is the only personal loan that I've ever applied for. So the lady at the bank asked us how long we wanted this loan to be open for, like how long we were giving ourselves to pay it back. And we said 6 months, and this lady at the bank was like, no, you can't pay this back in 6 months. So she opened a 18-month loan for us, so we had a year and a half to pay this money back. And we were like, it's not going to take us a year and a half, because like we know our situation, and although yes, I know the banks have to be quite careful, and they take into account, like they can see your spending habits, so they take that into account. But at the same time, like we knew that although yes, we like to spend this money and we have been spending this money, if we're trying to pay something back, we will do it. Anyway, we were right. We sold our old car, paid half of it back straight away, and then I think we had the whole lot paid off in 4 months. So it was all over and done very quickly. Because the other thing is with a loan like that, a personal loan from the bank, it does accrue interest. So it's in your best interest to pay it off quicker rather than leaving it for a longer time, because the longer you leave it, the more you actually have to pay. So yeah, we paid that off very quickly, over and done. And you know what? Those are the only debts, I'm pretty sure, that I've ever had. So now we're going to talk about some debts that I haven't had in the past. Some of them I'm planning on having, like a mortgage, which we'll talk about first, I suppose, and then others I don't want to ever have. So mortgage first. Mortgage, obviously we know, is the loan that you're given to pay for a house that you can't afford. So in the future, I do plan on having a mortgage because, I mean, I don't know what the situation is like around the world, but I assume this is quite a common position to be in. If mortgages didn't exist and house prices were what they are, I'd never get a house. Like, I'd never ever buy a house. So fortunately, mortgages exist so that you can buy a house that is otherwise out of your price range and then pay it off over, I think in New Zealand it's like 30 or 40 years. So it's a debt that most house owners have, because I mean 30 or 40 years is a long period of time in your life. So the way it works in New Zealand, I mean, I haven't been through the process. I'll probably have more insight once I have been through it, but I've done a lot of research about it, and from what I gather, usually you need to provide a 20% deposit on the house. So whatever the amount of money that you can provide is, banks will normally call that 20% and then they'll offer you the other 80% on top of that, but they also look into your situation to check that you are able to make the payments. So if, for example, you've had a relative die and leave you a lot of money, but you have no job or you have no part-time job, even though you can afford a deposit, banks won't give you a mortgage because you have no income to be paying the repayments. So you've got to have the deposit as well as the income to pay the money back. In some situations, it seems that banks will let you provide only a 10% deposit, but there's certain requirements that you've got to meet. And from what I gather, the less debt you've been in your life, the better a position you are to ask a bank for that 10%. In a moment, we're going to talk a bit more about like credit cards and overdraft and things like that. I imagine that is what banks are looking at if you come in asking for the 10% deposit. So in the case of Jonathan and I, who have never had that type of debt, I'm hoping, because one day I'm going to go into a bank and ask, I'm hoping that because we've never been in that type of debt, we'll be in a good position to ask a bank for a 10% deposit, and hopefully they'll approve that. Because I think by not being in that type of debt, it shows that you know how to manage your money well. And of course, like I said at the start of this video, everyone's in a different situation, and for some people, that type of debt is unavoidable. But if it is avoidable, like for us, obviously it has been avoidable. So if we had been in that type of debt when it was not necessary, banks are probably going to look at that and be like, well, you can't manage your money, so no, you're not going to get the 10% deposit. Also for mortgages in New Zealand, not that that's what this video is about, but interesting side note, in case you're not from New Zealand, or in case you didn't know and you are from New Zealand, you can use your money that's in KiwiSaver, so your retirement fund. You can use just about all of that to help you buy your first house. and that counts as part of your deposit. So that's something good to know if you didn't already. So moving into types of debt that Jonathan and I have never had and hopefully will never have. First of all, we've got credit cards. I don't know if this is more of like an older generation thing, because I know a lot of people my age that have never had a credit card, and I'm not sure at this stage if it's a generational thing, as in people in my generation will never have a credit card and will never need to have a credit card, or if it's more of like a, well, when your fridge breaks down and you don't have the money for a new fridge, then you get a credit card so that you can get a new fridge. I mean, at the moment I still know a lot of people my age that still live with their parents, so obviously that's not a concern. So maybe it's not generational, but it's more of like a life stage thing, if that makes sense. I don't know, I mean, Jonathan and I have been on our own for 2 years now. We've managed without a credit card, but obviously at this stage, you know, we don't have kids. There's a lot of expenses that come with kids that we're not having to pay, so we're able to put that money into savings at the moment. So, I mean, I'm just not sure. But the other thing is, like, when I came back from Japan, I had colleagues that told me stories about when they came back from their travels and then they had to pay off their credit card because they'd traveled using their credit card. They'd done their entire holiday using money that wasn't theirs. And that's how I see a credit card. It is money that's not yours. So my feelings about a credit card is that if you are in a situation where you don't have the money to get something that's an emergency, like a fridge, or I don't know, you know, something goes wrong with your house. Like, I can see that being an instance where you might get a credit card so that you can pay for that emergency on the spot. But when I hear about people going on holidays with their credit card, I'm like, but that's not your money. There's obviously a different mindset for some people, because in my mind, if I want to go on a holiday, then I save up the money from my job until I have enough money to go on this holiday. I don't borrow money from someone else to go on this holiday. So Jonathan and I went to Japan at the start of 2020. We were there for 3 weeks, and that was all our own money. We were in no debt for that at any point. We saved up for the majority of 2019 in order to be able to afford that holiday. So that's not something that we would consider getting a credit card for. Even for the emergency situations, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, I can see that being your only option to pay for an emergency. But if you have spare money each week, in my opinion, and the way that we do things is that we have money put aside for in case there's an emergency. If we were to have an emergency right now, we would not need to go and get a credit card because we have money put aside for in case something goes wrong. So that's how we avoid credit cards. Another type of debt is overdraft, which in a way is easier than a credit card because it's just linked to your account that you're using with your card anyway. And it just means that when your account reaches zero, you can continue to spend money. But again, it's money that's not yours. It's the bank's money that you're then going to have to pay back. In a way, this is more dangerous than a credit card because it's on the card that you use all the time anyway. So instead of saying declined when you run out of money, it will let you spend money that you don't have, and it'll just put you into overdraft. And unless you're checking and looking at your account, you know, like actually signing into your account and seeing how much money is in there, I'm not sure that you would know that you've gone into overdraft. Luckily, I have a mindset where I'm constantly checking my bank account. I have the app on my phone, so it's very easy for me to just log in and see how much money is there. But if you're not that type of person that likes to check that sort of thing regularly, then you might not know. So I think overdraft is a bit of a danger zone. I think different banks have different rules with overdraft. I think the rules for me were different when I was a student. So I think I had like $100 overdraft with no interest. But now that I'm not a student, I think that's changed, although what it's changed to, I have no idea because I don't use it. There's so many reasons that I think it's dangerous. I mean, if you had $10 in your account and you wanted to buy something that was $15, it would be so easy to just spend that money because you're like, well, it's only $5 into my overdraft. And then, you know, you would up and up and up the amount of overdraft that you're going into. And then what happens when you get to your overdraft limit, say that's 100 or 500 or whatever it is, what happens when you get to your overdraft limit and you have no money in your overdraft but there's something that you want or need to buy? What do you do then? You go to your bank and you ask them to put the limit up so that you've got more overdraft money. How do you get out of that? If you're just going further and further and further into debt and there's no consequence because there's no interest, or you've got like a long amount of time to pay it back, how do you bring yourself back out of debt? I know people that live in overdraft and, you know, they only pay back the amount that they need to keep it interest free, so they never ever pay it off. So in my opinion, the money that they're spending is never theirs. I think again this is a mindset thing. Like, they possibly are spending the exact same amount of money as I am, but it's just that the money that they're spending is overdraft money, whereas the money that I'm spending is my money. And what would it take if your overdraft limit is only $100? What would it take to just not buy that one thing that costs $100, say an eyeshadow palette, just as an example, because a lot of them cost about $100. What would it take to just not buy one eyeshadow palette, instead put that money towards paying off your overdraft, and then go back to spending as much money as you want? Because now, instead of being $100 into overdraft, now you're just at the limits of your own money. So instead of being like, I can't spend any more money because that's my overdraft limit, you go, I can't spend any more money because I have no more money. I think that's the difference in mindset between someone who lives in overdraft and someone like me who doesn't want to go into overdraft. So I see my bank account at $0, I see that as being my limit. But I mean, it's the same thing as a credit card. Like, it's money that you could use in an emergency, but you could also just have some money put aside for an emergency so that you didn't need to go into debt for that. Another type of debt which is so popular at the moment is Afterpay. So this is a really interesting one because I think a lot of people see this not as debt, but more as like a lay-by, but it's not. This is a type of debt, and after doing a bit of research, banks see this as debt, and they see it as a bit of a warning flag if you are applying for something like a mortgage. So Afterpay, if you don't already know, is that thing where you can buy something online, literally have it be on its way to you, but you have not actually paid for that item yet. You have only paid a percentage of that item. A lot of websites are offering this now, so you can pay something off over 4 weeks, like you would with a lay-by, except the difference is with a lay-by, you don't get that item until you finish paying it off, but with Afterpay, you get it straight away, even though you've not paid for it fully yet. So that is consistent with debt, that you have something that you've not yet finished paying for. And I know that it's very tempting when you're shopping online, something costs $200 and you're like, well, I only have $80. So okay, you pay it off over 4 weeks, $50 right now. You get to keep the rest of your money, and then your item will arrive tomorrow, but you're still paying this thing off for the next 4 weeks. Very tempting, but I think also very dangerous, because let's say you only have $100. You can buy $400 worth of stuff right now. In theory, I'm making these numbers up, by the way, just as an example. But then you get paid tomorrow. So now you have, I don't know, let's say you have $500 after you get paid. So with your $500, you could pay off everything that you bought yesterday, or you can put that towards, you know, if you're paying 1 week out of 4, you could put that towards $2,000 worth of stuff that you can have today. What happens next time you get paid? Do you pay off the things that you already owe, or do you just put down the amount that you have to and then spend the rest of the money on another whole bunch of stuff? Do you see how the cycle gets worse and worse? Even though you have the money to pay off stuff that you have already received, of course you're not going to want to. You're just going to pay off the amount that you absolutely have to, which is a quarter at a time, sometimes even less, because I think some places do 6 weeks of payment, so you're only paying off a sixth of what you have to pay in total, and then the rest of your money can go towards getting yourself into more debt. So another very slippery slope, and another one that I'm very wary of. I think for me personally as well, I have a very addictive personality type, and I just know that if I start doing this, I'm gonna find it really hard to rein myself back in, because I know that I'm gonna get swallowed up by this cycle where I just keep buying more and more with money that I either don't have in the case of a credit card or overdraft, or money that I do have but I should be using to pay off other stuff that I've already bought but not paid for. So for me, I know that it's safer just to not go there at all. If I don't let myself into the cycle, then I never get stuck in the cycle. So as I said, banks do see Afterpay as a red flag when you're applying for a mortgage. So if you have Afterpay that you've not yet paid off at the time that you're applying for a mortgage, they're definitely going to be worried by that. But I think they're also, even if you have paid it all off, I think if they're seeing a pattern of you using Afterpay regularly, they're also going to be worried by that as well, because again, it shows that you can't manage your money. I guess the responsible thing to do would be not to use the Afterpay and just to wait a few weeks until you are able to afford these things outright. I know I've said a couple of times that there are people in certain situations that are going to need to use these debts because of, you know, whatever is going on in their life. But I mean, I know people that think they have to use these types of debts when, you know, from an outsider's perspective, you can see that they don't. Let's just make up a scenario here. So let's say you got your pay for the week, you went out and bought some stuff, and at the end of the week, it's time for you to pay your rent, or you need petrol or something, and you go, oh shivers, there's no money in my account, or there's only 20 bucks in my account, or whatever. So you think you now have to go and get a credit card or overdraft in order to pay for your petrol. But if the reason you've got no money in your account right now is because you went out for dinner 3 times during the week, or you bought your mum a $200 birthday present, or you went out and bought yourself a $100 eyeshadow, you don't need a credit card, you don't need overdraft. You need to stop spending the money before it gets to rent time or before it gets to petrol time. And this is something that I literally know people in my life that do this, and they complain about not having money, and I know that they're however much in overdraft, they're in debt to the bank. And while I accept that some people do actually need this debt because they're actually in a situation where they can't afford certain things, I also know that there's people that don't need it and just can't manage their money. So if you are in debt, I want you to actually think about what you've spent your money on. I personally write down every single purchase that I make. If at the end of every day or every couple of days, I go through my account and I look at what I've spent and I write it down. I put it into categories. I've got a video on that, which I'll link up here. So I actually know exactly where all of my money has gone. So as a real life example of money management, this is my own personal situation that I'm in right now. I have $100 in my everyday bank account right now. So I could go out for brunch, I could go buy an eyeshadow palette, I could go, you know, I could spend $100. I could go to the shops right now and spend $100 because I have it. It's in my account. I could just swipe my card and spend it. But I have car insurance that I need to pay. It's due in like a week. So if I go out and spend that $100, I can't pay my car insurance. So you have to be thinking ahead. You cannot just be like, I have $100, I can spend $100. You have to think what's coming up. If I spend $100, I can't pay my rent. Fortunately, today is payday, so I am going to get paid this evening, which is good because my car insurance is $300, not $100. But you know, that is a constant. You always have to be thinking about what's coming up, because at any point you could very easily spend every single dollar that you have in your account, but then you can't pay rent, you can't pay petrol, you can't get food, you know? So if you're just spending the amount that you have and then going into debt for the things that you need, that's not a responsible way of living. You should be first allocating your pay to the things that you need, and then all of those things that you want, you can have them if you still have money left over, but they shouldn't be the things that you're spending your money on first. I feel like I'm preaching so hard in this video. I think I might need to take it down a notch or two. The last thing that I want to talk about though is phone plans. So when you go to buy a phone, in New Zealand anyway, there's 2 options. You can either buy the phone outright, and usually those are the cheaper phones anyway, or, and this is usually for the very expensive phones, and it's almost like Afterpay. You like pay some of the money and then you pay it off over like 12 months or 18 months. It's literally like a little loan, but for a phone. I find it so bizarre. But anyway, I think a lot of people choose this option because possibly they're very drawn to the very expensive phones. So you get the phone, and then you're paying it off over a year or a year and a half, and it comes with some ridiculous plan that gives you phone calls and data and whatever. And the deal is that you're stuck in this one plan until you finish paying off the phone. I think that's the deal anyway. From what I've seen in stores, that seems to be the deal. And I just don't really get it. My my brother buys into these sorts of things, so he'll buy this super expensive phone that comes with a super expensive plan, and then he pays monthly, and by the end of the 18 months, when he's finally finished paying off his phone, he decides that his phone's too old and he needs another really expensive one. And these are phones that are like over $1,000, which if you're an Apple user, I guess that's just what you know and what you expect. But as someone that doesn't buy into that crap, my phones usually are around $200. I buy it outright. There is no plan that I'm forced into having for any amount of time. I choose my own plan. Guess how much my phone plan costs every month? It's $16, $16 a month. And people are out there paying like $80 because it comes with data, and I'm like, my plan comes with data. My plan comes with rollover data, which means that whatever I don't use this month rolls over into next month. I at this point have accumulated so much rollover data, I could use my data all day, every day for like a month. I could be watching all sorts of videos and I don't think I'd ever run out of data. So don't look down on the cheap little plans that you can buy yourself because they're really good. I reckon I get the same amount of stuff as you would get with one of those plans, but I'm only paying $16, whereas with the plan, I don't know, you might be paying $40, $60, even $80 a month. I remember my brother's one was like $80 a month, and he was trying to justify it to me. He was like, yeah, but I get phone calls throughout New Zealand. I'm like, I get phone calls throughout New Zealand for free as well on my plan, and mine's $16. You don't have anything that I don't have. So what is the benefit? You're paying more for your phone, you're paying more for your plan. I don't get it. Anyway, so that's another type of debt that I've never had, and I don't think I will ever have. Those are all the things that I wanted to talk about in this video. If you can think of any other types of debt that I've not mentioned, then do leave me a comment. I don't by any means think that I've mentioned every single type of debt, but these are the ones that came to mind, like the common types of debt that we hear about all the time. If I've offended you in this video, I'm very sorry. I'm not trying to offend anyone, but I am trying to make people think a bit more carefully about what they're spending and whether or not they need to be in debt. But if I have hit a nerve, then I am very sorry. I know that money is a very touchy subject. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it here. Thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of the video, and I'll see you later.